everybody, it's Jessica Jones. I'm the Cryptid Huntress. Welcome into our remote viewing show tonight. Gosh, we've got a great show lined up for you guys. I have remote viewed the ghosts and the circumstances and everything surrounding the ghost of Flight 401. That is a plane crash that happened, I believe it was in 1972. All right, so this is going way back. Okay, it's going to the way back. However, this story is dynamic, and y'all know I don't talk about ghost haunts very often here unless it's combined with some cryptids. But tonight we're going on a ghost hunt tonight. Okay, but this is going to be super exciting. I've remote viewed this stuff. I have a lot of data for this target, and if you guys would like to follow along with all of my data, please go to my Patreon. Shout out to all my Patreon members. By the way, my VIP Patreons, I'm mailing out something for you guys in the morning. I got a nice little something this month, okay? And it may have something to do with gnomes. I'm obsessed with gnomes, y'all. Okay, it's another gnome thing. I was gonna say prize, like you got a Happy Meal or something. But anyways, yeah, so you guys become a member of my Patreon if you'd like to follow along with my data. You get full access to all the raw data there, okay? So if you guys would like to follow along with all of my shows, please go to my website. That's thecryptidhuntress.com. I have that updated today. I updated it. It's all the way up to date. And I did add another event where I'm going to be publicly speaking. I'm going to give a presentation at the World UFO Conference. Okay. Which is crazy, y'all. I've experienced several UFOs in my time. So I've been asked to be a presenter at the World UFO Conference. That's happening in Georgia at the end of June. Okay, so I hope you guys will come see me. And like I said, I have a Patreon if you guys would like to follow along with my data. And I even post the shows, like the videos for all my shows are in there as well. Also, if you'd like to support me in other ways, I do have a shop. That's the War Woman Goods. And it's not even about supporting me. It's about buying awesome Native American jewelry and stuff. Turquoise, y'all. Who doesn't love turquoise? Okay, it's in my shop. I will throw in some free merch with purchase on all of those. Okay. Oh yeah, and as far as the events I'm going to be at, y'all, let me just go ahead and do this now. These are my upcoming events. I do have the World UFO Conference in Clayton, Georgia, June 29th. July 15th, 8th through 18th, we have the Full Disclosure Now Conference in St. Pete, Florida. August 1st through 4th, the Appalachian Starseed Reunion in Old Fort, North Carolina. And September 6th through 8th, I'll be at the East Tennessee Squatch Out in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. Okay, so here's some of the flyers for those events. Y'all come see me. Okay, well, let's get to the show tonight. Okay, I'm super excited. I have Dennis Carroll here in the studio tonight. And Dennis knows a lot about this, way more than I do. And he has a lot of good input tonight. So let me give an overview and then we'll bring up Dennis. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 was a scheduled flight from New York's JFK Airport to Miami. Shortly before midnight on December 29, 1972, the Lockheed L-1011 TriStar crashed into the Florida Everglades, causing 101 total fatalities. 3 cockpit crew members, 2 of the 10 flight attendants, and 96 of the 163 passengers were unalived. The crash occurred while the entire flight crew was preoccupied with a landing gear switch. A light would not come on, so they didn't think the landing gear was going to be going down. The captain bumped the control panel. I think he hit the steering wheel. If planes have steering wheels, I don't know. Okay, he hit something. But it caused the airplane to turn off the autopilot. Of course, everybody was so focused on what was going on with the landing gear indicator that they didn't notice that the plane had gone off of autopilot. And it is the yoke. I see you. Thank you, Poncho. It's the yoke. Okay, so because of this, the aircraft gradually lost altitude and crashed into the swampy, alligator, anaconda, python-filled Florida Everglades. Captain Robert Loft and First Officer Don Repo were among those who had perished in the crash, and the crew of other Eastern Airlines planes insisted later on that their ghosts had been making appearances on board later flights. Now, that is because pieces of the crashed plane were salvaged and put on other airplanes with the same airline, which was not uncommon, by the way. Ghostly sightings were so common that there were more than 20 instances reported. And I think that they finally took, okay, from what I understand, is they actually ended up taking all those parts that came off of the crash plane that they had put on other planes. The hauntings were so bad that they took those parts back off and replaced them with new parts. Okay. It was just bad juju. And that is part of my remote viewing data. I wrote down bad juju. I do remember that bad juju because I was tasked with a coordinate remote viewing target of the ghost of Eastern Airlines Flight 401 crash. Okay, so tonight we're going to go over that data, but more so, I want to hear more about these ghosts and about the hauntings. I know you guys do too. So I have Dennis Carroll here, who has a lot of experience in the paranormal, the occult, UFOs, cryptids, demonology, ghosts. We're talking about ghosts tonight, y'all. Okay, so please help me welcome to the show my friend of Hunting the Shadows podcast, Dennis Carroll.
Good evening.
Dennis.
I'm going to tell our audience tonight. We're going to get real spooky tonight here, okay? I was going to tell our audience tonight that in all of the annals of the paranormal, this is one of the most strangest and darkest modern day ghost stories that we're about to explore tonight. The ghosts of Flight 401. As you know, there's a movie been made about it. Books have been written about it. We're going to talk about that in a little while. But the most interesting thing of all, this is a modern day kind of a ghost story, jet age ghost story, and that's the interesting part about it.
Yes. It's okay. So it happened in the 1970s. That's not that long ago, but it's also a lifetime ago for a lot of people. It's actually just a little bit before I was born, a little while before. And so I'm not going to say how long, but it was before my time. But it's still, this story is still very popular today, actually. I was surprised because when I was doing my research on it and I watched the movie, I found it in your playlist, like you told me. I found the Ghost of Flight 401 movie, which I watched today, which is pretty good. Okay, it's a pretty good movie. But if you look this up on YouTube and online, there's a lot of videos made about it. Okay, a lot of research has gone into this. And I was shocked almost. I didn't realize it was so popular.
Oh yeah. I was going to tell everybody too that I'm actually streaming the movie. You can find it on my playlist on Hunting the Shadows YouTube channel. You can stream it from there if you want to watch. I think it's about an hour and a half. Fantastic movie. It is great, and it really does cover in detail a lot of the things that went on. I remember very well. It's been a long, long time ago. That I was in the dentist office. I was actually in a waiting room. Yes, Dennis was at the dentist. And yeah, and I was just going through a magazine. I came upon this article. I hadn't heard anything about it, because what happened, Jessica? The airline, Eastern Airlines, tried to squelch this thing. They tried to cover it up. They didn't want anybody to know about what was really going on. They threatened pilots and stewardesses. If you even mention this, you're out the door. That's it. It was a big cover-up thing going on. And this was, I think, 1972 is when that happened. But they still have that attitude about a lot of things. Even with UFO research, I run into that as well. Although I've done a lot of, in my profession, I've done a lot of ghost hunting and stuff like that. Also, I go into a lot of UFOlogy. And they don't even want the pilots talking about seeing things like that anymore. There's still a tendency to cover this stuff up, especially by the airlines themselves. Now, this airplane that crashed, this jet, was a pretty good-sized jet. It was a horrendous and very traumatic crash over the Everglades at night. Yes, it was a pretty good-sized aircraft. And I don't even think it was filled to complete capacity. when it crashed. But there were I think there was a frog digger. He was in a airboat out on the Everglades, and he saw the plane go down. He and another man were on this airboat, and they rushed to the site, and even they got burned by the jet fuel that was coming out of this plane and getting in the water. When fuel like that gets on the water, it'll stay on the surface and burn. So they even got some burns from trying to rescue a lot of these people. But what's interesting about this too is that some of the people, a good many of them, survived. I think it was 75 survived. I think only most of the stewardesses did.
Yes.
I think only 2 of them didn't, lost
Correct.
their lives. But the haunting was attributed more to the crew than anybody that was actually died on the plane itself. That's the interesting thing about the ghosts of Flight 401. They are mainly the captain and the engineer, Don Repo and Bob Loft. Bob Loft was the captain. He died, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he died on the scene. Don Repo died later in the hospital room. You'll see this in the movie if you watch it. It was a very traumatic way. Then they were Bob. Let's see, Don Repo. Yeah, Don Repo was actually the flight engineer. He was down in the hellhole. Now the hellhole is the little space in beneath the cockpit. And what he was doing down there, he and another guy, I think, went down in there. They tried. Their landing gear didn't look. The light didn't come on, showing them that the landing gear was down. They were going in to land at the airport, and the light was not on. It's supposed to come on and say, your landing gear is down. So they knew it was probably something going on with the bulb. They took the cover off and they were messing with the bulb. That's what you were talking about earlier. When all this was going on, they accidentally knocked the autopilot off when he leaned over to get to pull the cover off the bulb. But down in the hellhole is where Don Repo was, and the hellhole has a little small opening in the bottom, a little lens light. You can look through it and see the landing gear. And that's what he was down there trying to do. He was trying to look at it, put eyes on it to make sure it was down. Because, of course, as you know, you would not want to land an airplane without a landing gear. That would be very bad, too. But unfortunately, none of them realized that they were losing altitude that quick. But when he looked through the little peephole in the hellhole there, he immediately saw the Everglades coming up on him. He knew before he could even warn them that plane was going down. It was very big, very traumatic incident.
It's really perplexing how they didn't notice that the plane was losing altitude so quickly. That just, I just recently flew on several different planes to get to Reno and back home, and that was a lot of flying for me. And just the turbulence and everything, and I mean, even losing altitude. I mean, my ears will get stopped up.
Yeah, your ears pop. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like they would have noticed, or people on board would have noticed. Of course, a lot of people may have been asleep because it was late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it was late. It was late in the evening, and a lot of them may have been asleep or dozing off, or and they might not have noticed some of the altitude differences and all that. But it was a very slow descent. What it was, they were descending and getting ready to land at the airport. And actually, the plane was making a turn to the left. And when it went down in the Everglades, the left wing hit first. It hit the ground first, and then the left engine hit. And then they said that's what it burrowed up into the ground, and that's what swung the plane around. And it hit on the other engine. That's when it blew up. It exploded a lot. But the reason why there were so many survivors, they say that would not have happened. That probably everybody would have got killed if it hadn't been doing that turn when it hit. Instead of going flat down, it kind of hit on the wing, which may have saved. The safest place you ever fly on an airplane, I'll tell you this, the safest place is usually the tail section. That's the one section that kind of survives a hit like that. But if you really go down, it depends on how you go down too. And that's the way this thing went down. it went down on his left wing, and that way, because the frog digger saw it. He was on the boat, and he said it was right in front of him. He saw it go down, and it was a tremendous crash because it scattered over, I don't know how many hundreds of feet down there through the Everglades, swamp infested, gator infested place like the Everglades. Bad enough, you know.
I mean, okay, and so I got it for the audience. I can hear it in people's heads right now. What is a frog gigger? Okay, now I know because I'm from the South. I grew up on the lake. Frog gigging, y'all. Okay, and what Dennis is saying is frog gigging. Okay, that's where you get in a boat at night and you put on a headlamp and you get a spear. Okay, because a lot of people do like frog legs. Okay, people eat frogs down here in the South. Okay, I can be
frog legs,
frog legs.
yeah, I
It's
sort of like
delicacy.
chicken legs. Yeah,
It tastes like
they
fishy
say it
chicken.
tastes like chicken. I don't eat them. No, thank you.
It's not good. I don't like it. It tastes like fishy chicken. But they turn on their headlamps and it blinds the frogs. It makes them, I don't know if it blinds them, but it makes them freeze, and they hit them with the spear, and that's what frog gigging is, y'all.
And
Okay, so these songs are frog gigging.
the frog eyes light up too. They kind of got the eye shine. You can really see them good with the flashlights and stuff like that. I've seen people go hunting for frogs, but they might have been doing some gator hunting too, and that was supposed to, I think, in some parts of the Everglades was kind of illegal to do. We'll never know the real story on that, but I mean that could be part of it as well. But they were really considered heroes because they went over there. They did save a lot of lives. They were just in the right place at the right time. Hopefully, you know, they got recognition for that because they did save a lot of lives. But it was a horrendous crash. And you know, Jessica, when anything like that happens, I mean, you're like sitting in your chair one moment, dozing, and the next minute you're on the edge of eternity. I mean, that is a very traumatic thing to know. And you know, I've seen a lot of these cases, these paranormal cases like that, where that I think is a contributing factor. That trauma, you know, that certain jerking away of life is very, got to be very traumatic, and would cause definitely ghostly type activity from things like that. But I find it very important that it was more or less a haunting by the crew than the passengers, because they were, I think, felt responsible in some ways for what happened, and they were. It was human error, and you know, we all are imperfect. We make mistakes, but I think that they realized, especially Don Repo, realized he lived long enough in the hospital to even, I think, talk to his wife a little bit before he succumbed to his injuries. They kind of knew that what happened when he looked through that peephole in the hellhole. He knew what was happening. They were way too close to the ground, for that matter. That had to be something that was sort of like a psychic bond on them to hold them back in this life. Unfinished business always seems to be one of the factors of the hauntings that we're going to be talking about tonight, especially.
It does, yeah. You know, I just recently, well, first of all, thank goodness those men were frog gigging out there, because they were able to. I don't know if they called in. I mean, this is before we had cell phones, okay, and stuff. So, but they were able to get to the crash site. They were shocked at what they saw, and I do remember hearing stories about and reading about people being strapped in their chairs still. And
Yeah.
I mean, there was like drowning going on. People were burned. Their skin was burned. They were missing their clothing. There were alligators out there. I mean, you got to think. I didn't hear a lot about this, but I'm assuming alligators probably got some of those people, and snakes and all sorts of stuff.
Well, a lot of snakes. You got a lot of alligator, definitely a place like that. And one of the really God sent things about this were those frog gators, because they said the rescuers were able to get there a lot quicker because they saw their lights. There were no lights around there, and they saw them get the frog gators' lights and everything. They let them into where they needed to be, so it was really good that they were there. Definitely, it was a big help. But that had to be a horrendous thing if you think about it. How very traumatic that was. Some of them drowned in their seats, definitely, because the water was not that incredibly deep, but it was muddy water. It would take you down much further. You know, it wasn't like 20 feet down or anything like that, but it was shallow, but it was still very muddy water, almost like quicksand in some areas. That's why you had to use airboats to get around in a place like that. I've been in the Everglades, and believe me, that's like another world altogether. And I've always, my own self personally, wanted some of the wreckage from this plane because it's very, very well known in paranormal circles. I'm going to tell you the story in a little while about Ed and Lorraine Warren. They actually have some of the flight wreckage of 401 in their museum, and they have actually had visitations by Don Repo there
Oh my
because
God.
of that. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, well, and
Uh-huh,
it's sad. It's also very sad. Boss
uh-huh,
Monster here in the chat. Hey, Boss Monster says my friends. Okay, so Boss Monster knew a flight attendant, I believe, is what I read with one of the previous comments that they left here. Knew
uh-huh.
someone that had experienced some hauntings. I think it was a flight attendant, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, these comments are going by quick tonight, y'all.
Oh
But
yeah.
had experienced know someone that experienced some hauntings from that flight. It says my friend said that flight crew would see people walking down the aisle of the aircraft, only reflections in the salvaged parts.
Mm. Yeah, they used a lot of salvage parts. Some of the parts were the ovens they were able to use on other planes, so they had to take those out later. I think some of the floorboarding was used. They were able to salvage a good many parts, not the engines or anything like that, but some of the usable parts. There weren't that many salvaged, a few. Um, but wherever the salvaged parts show up, you had this visitation type thing going on. I think one of the actual things you'll see this depicted in the movie is that one of the stewardesses sees Don Repo in the reflection of the oven doors in the galley. But what was so startling, Jessica, there are several reports of the pilots of other planes with these parts on there seeing Don Repo and Bob off. Um, one incident, they were, I think, in a storm, going through a storm, and one of the pilots, actually, I think it was Bob Loft, sitting in a seat next to him. I think it was sort of like a jump seat next to him, and he said to the pilot, he spoke to him and said, "There'll never be another crash of a 1011." Actually spoke to him, and it was an interaction thing. It wasn't like a residual type haunting. This was an interaction thing. We call this an apparition type, a visitation. In other words, you're like being visited, being contacted by these things. And another one was of Don Repo being seen sitting in the passenger section next to a woman. And the woman later said, I noticed him sitting there, and, when I looked again, he wasn't there anymore. And she described him in total detail of what he really was, what he looked like. And they said that was Don Repo. And he, I think, actually spoke to the woman. And it was, there was, I think, some turbulence or something. And he actually spoke to the woman and said, uh, you don't have anything to worry about. Everything's going to be all right.
Oh wow.
Very freaky stuff.
Well, okay, Boss Monster was a flight attendant, okay, and says, I was a flight attendant for 23 years, and it is extremely hard to get flight crew to say the things they saw. Now, were they put under NDAs, like non-disclosure agreements, do you think, or the people who survived this crash, or do you think that they just, because some people, they get their pensions threatened and things like that if they talk, I mean, or do you think they were just too weirded out by it to talk about it?
No, yeah. But like I said, they tried to cover a lot of it up. That was just, they thought it was bad for business. Nobody would want to fly on a plane, kind of thing. I'm sure I can kind of see their point of view on it. But there was one incident where I think this was like an intercompany thing, where some of the stewardesses had a little newspaper that they put out, and in one of the little newspapers, they had a little bit of something about the ghost of 541. Oh, when the airline found out about that, they put a clamp down. I think they fired some of them for it, and because I think one of the stewardesses gave a passenger one of these little newsletters with that on there. Oh, that was a big thing about that, and so like I say, it was a big cover up. They did not want anybody saying absolutely anything about it.
Man, it's really sad. And some of my data includes, and I mean, we can go over my data in just a minute, but I remember it including spirits needing to be crossed over. Okay, like that was actually in the data. There were spirits that were kind of stuck. Okay, that just needed, and I think that happens, like you said earlier. It's from that trauma. I was watching. I've seen. I love watching videos of weird stuff. People send me stuff all the time, and I was watching. I guess it was on TikTok, of course. Okay, and there was a old junkyard where they took wrecked vehicles where people had died in them from car accidents. And there was one vehicle in particular where they filmed it, and there was a little girl that kept sitting in this car, and she looked like she was as solid as you and I, but she would
Yeah.
come and she would go and disappear and reappear, and it was really, to me, that's just heartbreaking. I don't want to think that our loved ones get stuck in a loop, you know? So,
But that's very much just kind of like what that pilot said about Bob Loft, seeing him sitting right there next to him in that jump seat, so the lightning reflected on him just like you would a normal solid person. This wasn't a wispy, misty looking thing. This looked like a solid person to him. And he said, and what his reaction to it afterward tells you another story, because the pilot said it just completely changed my view 180% of what I once believed. When you see something like that, it changes all your perspective completely of things you thought you knew. And these pilots are very practical men. They have to go through a lot of school. They have to go through a lot of training. I don't see them imagining stuff like this. I see these guys are very practical, and that I think is one component of this Ghost to Flight 401 that interests me the most. These professionals are saying they see this. Uh, it's not just a flight so fancy as somebody thinking they might have saw something, but they were actually reporting these things as if they were true things that happened to them, and their reactions to it is what tells you the story.
mhm.
When something like that, affects you so badly and so much, it's been some kind of experience of trauma, you might say, just to see something like that.
Yeah, it's very traumatic. Now, Gerald's in the chat. Hey, Gerald. Gerald says when they took out the parts from 401 off the planes, off of the new planes where they had put
It
the
stopped.
the haunting
Yeah,
stopped.
yeah, it
That says a
stopped
lot.
immediately. Well, it was almost as if these spirits had that attachment to that plane. Okay, no matter what that plane was, and they had to assemble that plane in a hangar on the airport. The many parts that they could find, assemble it again to understand what actually went wrong. Of course, the black box was recovered and all that, and they finally figured out exactly what happened. That it was human error, that caused the plane to crash. But that was sort of I'm not going to say icing on the cake, but that sort of, told the real story. It was a human error thing about it. That was a tragedy on top of a tragedy, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I can actually kind of understand why Mr. Repo, okay, stuck around, okay, and felt even more trauma, because that's a lot of lives that were lost over something that was so careless, and it's such a simple little mistake that he made, but it cost the lives of so many people, and so I can understand. Although, I mean, if I were someone who was like a ghost hunter and I went to, and I'm assuming ghost hunters go to the spot sometimes. I don't know. I do know that there are a lot of skunk ape sightings down in the Everglades, a lot of Bigfoot sightings down there. I wonder
And
how that was affected, or that the plane
and
crash affected them.
Don Repo's wife actually felt a visitation from him as well, even after he died in the hospital. All that she smelled his Bayram cologne that he wore a lot, and she used to, you know how it is with married couples. She used to get on to him a little bit about putting too much Bayram on. And
Mhm.
even after his funeral, she smelled that when she should not have, smelled that odor. And she could feel his presence nearby. And they had, I think, a young child or maybe a couple of children. I forget exactly how that went, but he was a real big family man, and he would definitely, I think, somebody like that would put in an appearance or try to communicate with their spouse, or and their family after something like that. Like you said earlier, this was a traumatic thing, and all of a sudden you just jerked out of this life and into eternity or whatever the situation is. That has got to be a horrendous, I'm gonna say, spiritual pain like thing going on. And in my career, I have done a lot of soul rescues, and you will see an actual in the movie, and they do an actual soul rescue. Supposedly, these people did for Don Repo and Bob Loft to try to get them. They were restless spirits. Whenever a spirit seems to be restless, unfinished business, something is holding them back from going over to where they need to go. You do a soul rescue. You try to help and show these people that they need to go on. There's nothing here to hold them anymore. And it's not that they're reliving the pain over and over and over again. It's like as if they're stuck in time, you might say, sort of time and space. They're stuck there, and you have to sort of go in. It would be a horrible thing to leave someone like that in that position. So I have done a good many soul rescues in my time for that, and you kind of know when they work. You kind of know, you kind of feel when you got across. And I think that happened with Bob Loft, that they felt more that he kind of went on to where, but Don Repo is supposedly still with us in some ways. He didn't go over. He's almost like he's still attached to his family, kind of thing. He just
Mhm.
doesn't want to leave, kind of what. But that's an interesting fallout from the Ghost of Flight 401.
Oh wow. Yeah, speaking of the traumatic deaths and I don't know if this is a buzzword at YouTube, but suicide, okay, taking your own life. Someone very close to me did that, okay, back in 2001. And when he did that, it was super very traumatic, okay, to everybody, all of our friends and myself. I mean, it was someone very close to me. And so I actually a couple within the next few years, couple of years, I think it was a couple of years, I went and did like a ghost box session and stuff. And I just was when my brother had passed away too, and I was like, oh man, so I went to go do a ghost box thing at this shop,
Uh,
okay, and I just was like, hey, where's so and so? I'm not gonna say his name, but I was like, hey, where's so and so? And is he here? And we had a hard time finding him. The spirit guides on their side, because it was like he had died a very kind of traumatic death and stuff, and was kind of stuck there in the darkness. And so we helped move him into the light, and it was a beautiful experience actually when we did that, but it was really sad. Um, and I'm also just coming out of Virginia City about a week or two ago with our ghost hunt that we did there with all of the self unalivings, I guess you call it, out of there, from all the gamblers and the people drinking and stuff. A lot of death, a lot of trauma, but a lot of ghosts sticking around, spirits sticking around that need to be moved into the light, or wherever we're supposed to go, wherever we need to
uh.
go. So
And we got to remember too. We got
yeah.
to remember too, Jessica. Death. It's got to be the most traumatic thing of all. Death is actually the most traumatic thing that we may ever face in our lifetime, without a doubt. And it's not unheard of that you would want to reach out to a family member that's gone. That you would want some kind of communication from them. That you would want that sign or whatever it is you're looking for. And it's not that far fetched that they might want to reach out to you
Yeah.
from the other side, of the deal. That's an interesting part of it too. And I have seen instances of that happening. A lot of times I've had a lot of cases where people have like been visited by their relatives. I call this sort of it's really like a gift from God in a way. It's a visitation, but it's sort of meant to comfort you in that respect. I've had a lot of people. I know I had two brothers one time that had their mother had passed away a couple of weeks, and one of them come to me and said, "Well, I saw my mother just last night," And we buried her 2 weeks ago, and I saw her just last night. And I said, well, tell me what happened. She said, well, me and my brother were sitting in the living room, we're watching TV, and the door between us opened up, and my mother looked in at us on us and smiled and shut the door. And said, both my brother and I saw her. We saw her just as plain and just as solid as you are. And said that, and I asked him an interesting question. I said, did it scare you? Did she scare you? He said, well, no, that was our mother. I said, well, what that is, I consider it sort of a gift from God, because you're like being comforted. You're being shown that everything's all right and there's nothing to worry about, especially with this relative. And I think that is a gift in many ways.
Yeah. It is a gift. Now, whenever we're having full body experiences, like where we see a person, it looks like a person, but it's actually someone who's passed on like that, and they look just like you and I. How does that work, Dennis? How does that even work? Is that just them coming into our reality, coming in from another dimension, changing their frequency? Is that what this is? Is that what spirits are? It's just
I
us.
think it's very much. I think it's very much like playing with a dial on a radio. You ever do that? You pick up, you hear some little sound, and it's kind of very much like that. I think it's got a lot to do. I call it the frequency of the universe. Okay. It's like, and we were talking about the other day about the chronovisor. We talked about that. And the originator of that supposedly was Alexander Graham Bell, and it didn't turn out was something you could look at. He was looking for radio waves, of course, and he said that, and this is a very interesting hypothesis, that no sound ever truly goes away. It's somewhere in the atmosphere around us. And I have seen instances that prove that to be, I think, a very viable theory, okay? But he was looking to try to hear sounds in the past, like maybe pick up on a famous speech or whatever the situation is. He was trying to go through it with it through sound instead of sight, like the chronograph that we talked about. It's not that far fetched. He could have been the one that really came up with the idea for something like that. But here's the interesting thing. I think all of that is around us in many ways, and we just don't pick up on a lot of it sometimes. Let me tell you a quick case that I had, and it's very sad. Where this little child, I think he was about 6 years old, little boy, and he had gotten run over, hit by an automobile in front of his house, and killed. And they people, and not his parents, they didn't live, they moved. But other people that lived in that house kept seeing this little boy in the yard. And he would never come all the way up to the house. He would always come to the front yard, and just right next to the road where he was supposedly killed. They would see this little boy. And so they told me about it. And I said, well, that's very, very sad, to think that he's still trying to come home here and not making it. So I went out in that yard that day with those people, and we did sort of like a soul rescue, And we said, I told the little boy, I said, you don't need to stay here anymore. Mom and Dad have gone. There's nothing left here to hold you anymore. You need to go to the light. You need to walk to the light and need to go where you need to go and find peace. Find peace and happiness, that. And after that we did that session, they never saw that little boy again. So hopefully maybe he cut loose the tie that were holding him here, And I think a lot of times, a lot of these spirits have these ties that bind, that old saying, the ties that bind our family and home and all this other stuff. I think those can be very strong psychic bonds in many ways to our spirits. And I think this causes or precipitates a lot of I call it spiritual interaction with us,
Yeah. Yeah. And so we have to just assume that Mr. Reno, one of the co-pilots, he had an attachment to that plane. I mean, that was his plane. That was his responsibility, right? It was his responsibility. So all the pieces that went with it and everything, he's a part of that. Because when we pass away, we're like, we can be all over the place all at once, most likely, I would think. Like our energy, our consciousness, we're not just stuck in one place, I don't think. But I don't know. He had such a traumatic death and such a connection to that plane. Okay, so I think that's what that is. Now, what about the airline stewardesses, like the flight attendants? Have they been seen? Because I know other stewardesses or I don't know if that's what you call them now, but flight attendants on the flights that had the parts in them in the future, they had very uneasy feelings and got scared and didn't like being alone in different levels of different planes and stuff. I mean, they were some people got really terrified of these hauntings.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And some of the stewardesses did not want to go into the galley alone. They wanted other stewardesses to go with them. There was a lot of anxiety at that time going on because of what was being whispered and told about from plane to plane. I mean, especially the planes that had the parts on it. You know, that would have to be on your mind if you were flying on that plane and you knew that that some part, whatever it was on that plane, was from another horrendous crash like that. That had to be something to prey on your mind a little bit too. You know, that you knew that was going on, so you might be expecting something like that. But what interests me, Jessica, that this happened a lot with passengers that were on there. Didn't know anything at all about that. You know, it wasn't just crew members and stewardesses. Passengers were reporting seeing some of this stuff. And like I said earlier, Ed and Lorraine Warren, who had some of the wreckage from Flight 401 in their museum, actually had Don Repo show up in their museum one night. And he was very close to the wreckage wherever it was in the museum. But they knew it was him because he still had the uniform on. Okay, just like you see in the picture you showed earlier. He had the uniform on. And they knew that's who he was. And here's an interesting sideline, talking about synchronicity. It turned out that Ed Warren had gone to school and was a childhood friend of Don Repo's wife, that freakier wife.
Yeah. That's odd. What is that? 6 degrees of separation? You know.
Yeah. So I was thinking, you know, he would want to get in touch with Ed Warren. Maybe that's what he was wanting to do, because they had a mutual friend.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty cool. Okay. So Ed and Lorraine Warren took interest in this case with the hauntings. I mean, that shows you right there. It must have been pretty legit if they took an interest in it. Why don't we go over some of this remote viewing data, Dennis? Why don't we do that real quick and just get an idea of kind of some of the data that I came up with for what happened, because the focus of this target was the hauntings, okay, and the crash, the hauntings, everything that has to do with it. And I'm not going to go over all the data. There's a lot. I actually got a lot here. I'm gonna just kind of go over like the gist of it, because I absolutely 100% was picking up on a swamp. Okay, so I was definitely in a swamp when I was remote viewing. I was picking up on a lot of chaos, a lot of destruction. Something that was otherworldly. And I also was picking up on a cover up of some kind with this target, just so the audience it's always the same with all my targets. There's always some kind of cover up going on. But something about I wrote down onboard crew. Okay. A craft, some sort of a vessel exploded is what I wrote down. I wrote explosion, fire. I wrote down press conferences. I was like press conference, podiums, cameras. So I was seeing like the whole thing from the crash to the hauntings. Okay, in this data. But there was something that really stuck out was I was picking up on a lot of bad energy and bad juju. And this was after the crash, after the press conference data. I picked up on a whole lot of bad juju, dark energy. Okay, dark entities and trapped souls is what I wrote down, and that need, and I heard clairaudiently they need to be crossed over. Okay, they need to be crossed over. So, and I also wrote down roaming, stuck, trapped. Okay, that was, and then I wrote down something about like, this is terrible because I wrote down machine demon and like AI demons and stuff. But what I was picking up on, but I was picking up on like the ocean. Okay, so I obviously was in the swamp or the ocean. But something that I found was really interesting in that data was I was picking up that I wrote down something was shot down. Okay, but I don't think it was shot down. Okay, but that was in the data, and you got to remember, like I'm trying to make sense of what I'm seeing, and all I see is something crashing. Okay, and exploding. So it's in the data. I wrote down shot down. Okay, but that doesn't mean that this plane was shot down. Okay, it doesn't, but that was in my data. So I just thought I'd mention that tonight. Okay. I do believe that they did recover the black box and everything. It wasn't a total loss because people did survive. And people did know. People were there to testify as to what happened. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And another thing that they had to, I didn't get into this, but it was the nose section was so crumbled up that they actually had to cut the pilots out. I think Don Repo, they got out pretty easy, but they had to cut Loft out, and he died there on the scene. The other pilot, co-pilot, was already dead on the inside, so it was a very trauma-inducing type thing, definitely without a doubt. No plane crash is good, but you see that how much wreckage there was to it. A lot of fuselage remained intact, which is why so many people survived, because, like I said earlier, the way that it hit the ground. But without a doubt that those three guys, had to feel a lot of, I won't say, weight of responsibility for what happened.
Guilt.
I think that's what you were picking up on.
Yes.
And a lot of that bad, dark feeling, and that's that weight of responsibility of for what took place in that respect.
I'm shocked that anybody survived this. Anybody. Somewhere I was reading somewhere that there were actually a good bit of survivors when the plane first crashed, but they all succumbed to their injuries because the injuries were so horrific. People survived the initial crash, but ended up dying later. Okay, so a lot more people survived in the beginning, and maybe part of that was because they couldn't get crews out there to rescue them fast enough. They're out in the middle of the swamp, and they just
I
had.
think one of the stewardesses had a problem after the crash. Kept going around. Why me? Why did I live? The rest of them died and I lived. That's the thing that preys on your mind too sometimes. Why me? Why did I live and the other ones died?
Survivor guilt. That happens.
Yeah.
It's got to be very traumatic. Okay, super traumatic. So that would definitely explain a lot when it comes to these hauntings. But I've been covering and I've talked about, even with you, about some of the historical hauntings, like the Bell Witch. Okay, we do have hauntings that have been recognized by our government. Okay, and how often does that happen? Okay, how often? Not often. But this is something. These hauntings were pretty well documented. Okay, and there were newspaper articles about the hauntings. Okay, and I'm not saying these are the end all be all, but this was such a big deal. They even made a movie about it.
Well, and another thing about the companies. It's an advertisement for the movie. If you need to watch the movie, folks, great movie. Anyway, another thing about the company, that we're trying to cover up so much and holding back on a lot of information, even from some of the families involved in it. That's not good. No matter which way you look at it. I think we're more, hopefully nowadays in more modern times, we're more open with stuff, but you have to wonder. You got to remember this when it comes to big companies like Boeing and some of these other companies that do these things. There are millions, billions of dollars worth of stuff on the line here. That's the way they look at it, and you can understand why some of the cover-up stuff's going on. But it's still not a good thing to cover stuff up like that. We're in a we hopefully live in a free society where stuff like that shouldn't be going on, but it happens all the time. The government is one of the most instrumental things for covering stuff up, whatever it may be. Not only weaponizing, but covering stuff up.
I mean, and I mentioned that when I was going over that. Some of that data was cover-ups come up almost in every target that I'm given. Okay, there's always some kind of cover-up going on, and this is no different. I mean, I don't know what else. Well, I say I don't know what else there's to cover up, but it's just weird. I got a lot more data, and I just don't know if it's pertinent to really talk about, because it involves a cover-up of and Remote viewing
Oh
data
yeah.
is not always 100% on target. I don't know. It depends on who's, interpreting my data. Okay. And I don't know enough about this case to interpret it all myself, but I was picking up on, like I said, like there was something getting shot down. Okay. And then there being a cover up about it. However, I don't know. I don't know. I know
Interesting.
it may just be kind of out there. I think it was just the way that I was interpreting it with my analytic overlay with what I was seeing. Okay, but I just think it's interesting to note because there are so many cover-ups and there is so much that's hidden from us, and
Oh yeah.
there's a concerted effort to keep the truth from us on everything. So I get suspicious, Dennis. I get real suspicious, especially when
Oh yeah.
things like that come up in the remote viewing data. You know.
Well, I'll tell you this, Jessica, the atmosphere for that still exists. I've had groups over the years, paranormal groups that I've mentored or been involved with and all that. And we've had members who were law enforcement, or I think we even had one member who was actually worked at a nuclear station. We could not reveal their identities. We had to give them the pseudonym names. We could not reveal their identities because it would have affected them in their workplaces. You still got that going on to this day. It's the atmosphere that this stuff creates. Like I said, back in the old days, back when I first started, they was ready to put you on the funny farm for some of this stuff. If you talked about it in the open, you were a crackpot. That's what you were tagged and labeled as. Thank goodness that has changed a lot, but still, amongst companies, especially military, law enforcement, places like that, you still got to be very careful of your atmosphere that you're in.
You do. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think people are put on the funny farms or crazy farms, whatever you want to call them, all the psychiatric wards and stuff. I mean, because they had they were literally called lunatic asylums back in the Depression era, I guess, right? The 30s and 20s and stuff. There were a lot of lunatic asylums, and I think that that's my personal opinion. Is like, well, first of all, why were so many people crazy, or were they really crazy or not crazy, but they were put there almost like political prisoners or something, or they spoke their minds, kind of like you and I are doing right now, and talking
Oh,
about stuff that there needed to be an active cover up of some sort. So people were given lobotomies and stuff
oh
if they
yeah, yeah.
did things like we're doing
But
right now.
if you were back in the old days, really, if you were smart, you just didn't say anything because you knew you probably put your job on the line. I remember in the city where I live right now, years and years ago, there was a guy that actually had a very dramatic UFO sighting, and he was an ambulance driver. And it's back before they had EMTs. He was an ambulance driver. They almost cost him his job. He was almost laughed out of town for that. And I always felt pretty bad for the guy, whether or not he saw what he saw. That's no way to treat people just for coming forward and telling something that they saw or experienced. Um, that atmosphere that is still with us to a certain degree. You will be laughed out of certain places for even talking about Bigfoot or whatever the situation.
Well, those aren't my
They still
places.
snicker behind your back and laugh at you, but that's okay. I developed a very thick skin a long time ago, but it's still there. You can't ignore it. It still exists.
Yeah, I just had a revelation as we're talking because I'm thinking about, and doesn't have anything to do with our topic tonight, but we were talking about the lunatic asylums is what they called them, and all of those places they put people and they were given lobotomies, and like, and if you factor in like our history being covered up, and we talk about the Tartarian Empire and the cities being burned down and destroyed potentially by, I'm just going to say DEWs, okay, and hydrogen balloons, all that. Oh my God, there's so much going on in my head right now, y'all.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
that's why they had so many lunatic asylums, just to because they needed to change the history, and people
Oh yeah.
need to be thinking for
And
themselves and
you know,
speaking
and
up.
you and I
Yeah.
both know that the government goes out of the way to discredit people for even things that they've supposedly seen. And let's just say they're wrong, okay? But you're not supposed to discredit people for that. Try to ruin their lives or their reputations just because they saw something you don't agree with. But that's the way the government works on things. And like I said before, they have an office of misinformation. Absolutely. They muddy the waters that we got to walk in and try as researchers, try to see the things we need to see. They muddy those waters, and they do that on purpose. It is a form of psychological warfare, definitely, if you want to look at it that way.
Yes, yes. Carroll says back in the 1800s, it was commonplace to commit. Yeah, I mean, it was commonplace to commit people to asylums for any reason, and especially women.
Remember Joan of Arc? Joan of Arc. They burned her at the stake. Okay.
Yeah.
She heard voices, and that was it. You know what? Somebody said in one of the trials of Joan of Arc, maybe she really is talking to God. You know, maybe we got it wrong. You know, and they wouldn't listen to that guy. They go ahead and burn her at the stake.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
Yeah, that was their attitude. If you didn't follow the norms that they had set up, and it's still that way. Science is very much like that. I've talked to a lot of scientists in my time, and they're some of the most bullheaded, blinding people you can ever run into, because they see something only one way, and that's it. That's not what true science is, by the way. True science is questioning things, opening the mind up to figure out things, what's going on. You don't close the mind up on something. Just because something is a theory does not make it fact. But they have a hard time understanding that. You know?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, my brain is going 100 miles an hour. I need a brown dwarf. I see you in here. You and I need to do another show on our hidden history. Okay, so that's coming up soon. Brown dwarf and I have talked about a lot of. We'll do this on a future show, maybe on a Wednesday or something. We're going to talk about that because I think we need to cover this asylum thing and why people were put in them. Okay, for real. So I don't want to turn my channel into a conspiracy channel, though. Okay, I don't. But I think that it's part of like the unmasking of all the things that have been hidden from us. And I think that even getting like remote viewing targets that pertain to stuff like that would be great. You know, look into stuff. Even this flight. I mean, it could be something that's like, oh, there's no way there was anything hidden about this flight as to why it went down. But then I remote view it, and I'm finding like. Somebody wrote DEW in the chat, and I actually wrote that in my data. Okay, so that was actually in my data, but I just didn't feel like I needed to talk about that.
I think
made sense.
The interesting thing, Jessica, I think we sort of live in an age of conspiracy. I think all this really got going good during Watergate. I don't know if you remember Watergate from many, many years ago, but that turned out to be something that was real. And I think that kind of got the ball rolling on a lot of this conspiracy. Some of it is way out there. Some of it is, I don't know, would make great novels or movies probably. But some of it has the possibility of being true. Not all of the whole conspiracy itself, but parts of it. And that's what we need to kind of examine sometimes. But we don't need to go way overboard with the whole thing sometimes, because we're embracing innuendo, lies, rumor, supposition. You want the real truth facts. Like they used to say on Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am.
Just the facts.
That's the way law enforcement works.
I know.
You know,
you're a cop.
Yeah. If I interview you in a law enforcement capacity, I want you to tell me just what you saw, not what you think you saw. You know, and that's the way it works with conspiracy theories. Give me, as Carl Sagan says, extraordinary. You know, claims require extraordinary evidence. You need to back it up with the evidence. That's the way that goes.
That's true. That's true. But sometimes the evidence is so hidden, we got to remote view it. Okay. So, but this is interesting. Speaking of conspiracies, okay. Let's see. We've got in Walking Lightly. Hey, Andrew. Okay. So what are your thoughts on the disappearance of Malaysia flight? Okay. So now that would get us into like a whole different topic, right? But there's a lot of anomalies around airplanes though, and going missing. And some people say like the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, how many planes go missing from there?
Well, there's two very important factors you need to look at with the Malaysian flight. I've studied it quite a bit. It went over a lot of ocean, okay? And the oceans are a big place, folks, okay? They're not just a little pond and a little bit of water. And the oceans can be vast, especially in the Pacific areas. And if this guy, there's a lot of evidence that he, the pilot, you know, did this on purpose, that he took it off course on purpose, whatever. He might have wanted to commit suicide and take everybody with him, whatever the situation was. It's very sad to think about it, but that's probably what happened. But just because they can't find the airplane doesn't mean it's not there somewhere under the water. They're still looking familiar Earhart, okay, folks?
Yeah.
That's a vast area out there.
Yeah, I almost forgot about her. You can't forget about Amelia Earhart. That was one of the first missing plane incidents in our history books. Okay, so,
Yeah.
but yeah,
They
when you're
may have found Amelia Earhart's airplane, by the way. I don't know if you heard about that, but they have found a sonar hit that looks very much like the struts on their type of a plane. I hope it is. I hope the mystery finally is solved, but we'll have to wait a few more months to find out.
yeah. Well, the Malaysia flight, I have actually that has been a suggested remote viewing target for me, but I never got that. I have not gotten that as a target yet. Okay, so no one has tasked me with that. I have not gotten it. It has not come up. But if it does, maybe we'll do a show on it one day. Okay, because I've gotten a lot of information from a lot of different people on that, talking about it, and so it'll be interesting if that ever did come up. Okay, we talk about it. Who knows? I'm like Dennis. I mean, the ocean is vast. Okay, the ocean is vast, but I'm also seeing that there's active cover-ups going on. And like people are saying in the chat, they're like a little twisted says a lot of important people were on that flight. Okay, so
Oh yeah.
I don't
It's
know.
a possibility. It's a possibility there could definitely be some, shall we say, undercover type things going on that it went down that way. We don't really know. I mean, it's a lot of supposition on it, but until the plane is found, if they could ever find the plane, locate the black box, that might tell the whole story. You know, but
It might.
that's what's going to be. Like I say, it went down in a tremendous amount area of ocean water. And over some jungle too, so it's a possibility it could be anywhere out there. Hopefully, one day it will be found. But people do not realize, Jessica, and I was looking at this thing about the Titanic the other day. It is so far down. It's like, think about this a moment. It's so far down in the ocean. It's like about 4 or 5 Empire State Buildings down. Think about that.
Okay.
That is a tremendous amount, and nothing could survive that pressure. It would crumble you up like a tin foil sheet in a jiffy.
Yeah.
To me, that makes it very inaccessible place to try to discover anything. But it's not that unreasonable. They won't be found one day. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I just got zapped. I think somebody came and zapped me up. The aliens came in here for a second there and got me. Okay, so on some of the ghost shows, okay, so getting back into the ghost stuff here. I love watching, I used to love watching Ghost Adventures. I do not make that a secret. Okay, and there's been some ghost shows that go and investigate old airplane hangars and stuff. And those things are haunted, Dennis. It's just like old railroad museums and stuff. Something about the hangars, like where they keep World War II planes and stuff like that. Planes from all the different wars, I guess, that, I don't know what, I guess the connection would be. They would be haunted because of the trauma, if anybody died in them, or they had to go and they had guns on them. They were dropping bombs, and lives were attached to those. Lost lives were attached to them, I guess. What do you think about that?
Well, flight, I think too. Okay, any kind of flight, whatever you're talking about, it's kind of a spiritual thing when you think about it. Okay, you're hanging up there between heaven and earth, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I think it has a little bit of a spiritual thing for some people in that respect. And of course, when you talk about flights going down, a lot of people dying, that's very traumatic, and a lot of people together at one time, very much like a battlefield. The trauma you find on battlefields and stuff like that. I think you're gonna run into that. And also, there are many ghost stories in the past of the old biplanes that have been seen, supposedly like coming out of time or something, time and space, and being seen. like the Red Baron and all that supposedly has been seen in the sky. What, about 40 or 50 years after he supposedly died, and all these other things. You've got a lot, although this is a modern age thing, you've got a lot of old superstition, folklore, and ghost stories attached to these things. And I think that gives it an ethereal quality to it, and it sets the stage for a lot of these things. And but I agree with you. There was, and still is, I think, to a certain extent, cover up going on with the ghost of Flight 401. I think although Eastern Airlines exists no more, I think there may be some people out there whose reputations would still be on the line if some stuff got out. It's not been that terribly long ago. So you have to wonder about that factor as well on it. I'm not going to start a conspiracy theory on it, but I mean, that could be a factor to it. To me, where there's been one cover up, kind of tells you the fact there's a possibility there could be some more too. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Well, I think this was a Lockheed flight or airplane, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, Lockheed. So my friend Jeff Townsend, a good friend of mine who's been on the show, he came on talking about the Dogman and the Crosshairs a while back. He is a good buddy of mine. He retired. I think he spent 35 years working as a flight. Oh, what was it? He worked in building the airplanes at Lockheed. Okay, like he was one of the managers there that oversaw all the construction of the airplanes and stuff. So I would be interested to hear what he has to say about all this. So I have to hit him up later. I don't see him in the chat tonight, but I'll send him a message after the show. There's been a lot of strange things going on. A Little Twisted says, suspicious Boeing having a lot of mechanical problems lately.
Oh yeah.
And there's been a lot of weird stuff going on with our airplane companies lately.
I think you got to look at this, Jessica, and this is kind of the scary part, okay? You know how everything is sort of becoming lax nowadays. Things are not made the way they used to be. They're not taking a meticulous time about it. And when it comes to airline and air flight and all that stuff, you got to be very meticulous. You need to check your engines constantly. You need to check every nut and bolt on that plane. And I think a lot of times this is being skipped. I think it's not being done. I think that's the cover up. If you want to talk about a big cover up that's going on, they're not letting people know that they've laxed a lot on their safety regulations and things. They're cutting slack on it, and I don't think that needs to be done. But I think that's going on a lot of times. You see that happening with a lot of this Boeing stuff going on today. I think there's a reason for that. And like I say, they're getting lax. They're getting sloppy. And people's lives are hanging on the line on that. That's something I think another thing they definitely would cover up.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I mean, listen, this is all for entertainment purposes only. I love my life, y'all. Okay. I've been watching as a lot of whistleblowers are disappearing and stuff. So we're not whistleblowing, we're just talking. Okay. We're just talking. We're just discussing this, okay, Dennis, right? So oh my gosh, we're just living in such a weird time right now. And I do have to say that Carroll says, I blame it on the gremlins, Ghost in the Machines. That was in my data. Okay. That kind of stuff was in my remote viewing data, which is hilarious. It's not hilarious because it's sad and it's terrible. Okay. But the fact that you said that and it was in my data is pretty cool.
Well, that's an interesting thing, Jessica, about the skies above us. I'll call them the hauntings. I'm writing a book. I'm writing a book right now called Things of Nightmare. And one section in the book is Things of Our Haunted Sky. And there's a lot going on up there. There's some weird stuff going on up there. You've got Foo Fighters from World War II. You've got all these things. You've got UFOs or UAPs, as they call them now, being seen. These weird, strange lights, angelic things being seen, humanoids being seen flying in the air. The list goes on and on and on and on. Look up, people. You might not believe sometime what you might see in the sky, because I think we do live beneath haunted skies.
Oh yeah, man. I'll tell you somebody that looks up to the sky pretty often, and with me out in the woods, we've got Kristen Payton in here, my teammate. Oh my gosh, my good friend Kristen. Thank you for that super sticker, girl. You're so sweet. Kristen is actually my teammate at ASOG, Anomalous Studies and Observation Group. And she's the person who filmed the portal in the meadow. Okay. So, Kristen, thank you so much for being here. That means the world to me. It was good seeing you last weekend. Okay. So, thank you for being here. She says, I'd love to fly, but I always have negative thoughts in the back of my head when I do. And I know I did not like flying when I was going to Nevada. I was thinking about how shoddy the workmanship is of those planes, from all those whistleblowers and stuff. And you have to not think about it when you're on there. If you have to fly somewhere, you got to try not to think about it. Just hope for the best, right, Dennis?
Well, I've said that before in the past. If there are portals on the land, there are definitely portals in the air. They can occur anywhere, or at any time. And you have to wonder about some of the things that are seen in the sky. The giant rays that people see, they look like, manta rays, but they're flying. They're almost invisible looking things. People sighting dragons in the sky, stuff like that. You got some wild stuff going on up there. So if you're going to look for portal activity, it may not only be on the land. It may be in the sky above you as well. There's a lot of stories told about that around Skinwalker Ranch. And we need to do a show on Skinwalker Ranch one day. It is fascinating stuff. It has a lot to do with portals that have actually been seen on the land and in the sky. So these things can occur anywhere. But I was telling somebody the other day, and this is my own rundown on it. I believe that we're dealing with another dimension, and I believe it's a spiritual dimension. Okay, it's different than the three dimensions that we can see around, so 4 dimensions that are here. I think there's a 5th dimension, and I think it's a spiritual dimension. And I think it can be interactive through portal activity like that in many aspects. I think there's something like that, passing from one reality to another, from one dimension to another. I think a lot of that may be going on as well. I mean, that is a viable solution when you look at it, an answer to a lot of this stuff. But I believe without a doubt that in this universe with us, there is a spiritual dimension with us at all times. Whether we can see it or not does not make it not be there.
That's right. I like what Rain C says here, and this is my motto. I live by this. When the good Lord is ready for you, it doesn't matter where you are.
Well, it's like I've always said, if it's the pilot's time, I hope I'm not with him when it is. I hope it's not his time when I'm with him. But anyway, there is definitely, we each have our destiny to live, I think. I think we each have a destiny to live out. And we hope a lot of times it's not involved with other people's destiny. Sometimes, like on an airplane or a train or whatever the situation may be. I like that joke I heard the other day. He said, my grandfather warned people, do not get on the Titanic. He told them, get off the Titanic, and they threw him out of the theater anyway.
Oh, man. Wow.
Okay.
I mean,
they threw him out of the theater.
Oh, my God.
He was in the movie, okay. But
anyway.
Oh,
man. Okay, sorry. I was reading the comments. It took me a second. My brain's, okay. It took me a second there. That's funny. Okay, so, yeah. I was reading that somebody in the chat was saying that we should all watch the new season of Rain of Skinwalker Ranch and stuff. So, and I have not watched any full season of that yet. I need to catch up on because I hear they're amazing. I'd like to go to Skinwalker Ranch one day, to that place.
Yeah. I had a friend who investigated Skinwalker Ranch, and he actually had several encounters with a portal nearby. That there's some freaky stuff going on with Skinwalker Ranch. I'd love to go out there and check it out.
Yeah, me too. Well, we have our own Skinwalker Ranch down here in the South, Dennis. And maybe one day you can come hang out with us, and me and Kristen will take you there. But we have a place that it pretty much rivals the activity that we have on this research area that we have, rivals that of Skinwalker Ranch. So from portals to ETs to missing time, people turning into balls of light and shooting across the field, and you name it, we got it out there. So yeah. And
there's so many indicators of portal activity that they're not that hard to look for in that respect. You just got to know what you're looking for, and you got to be in the right place at the right time. That's the main thing, I think, when it comes to portals.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's the wrong place at the wrong time, whichever way you look at it.
Right, right. Well, time is an illusion, so I don't know. Yeah, even at the meadow where we go, the Skinwalker Ranch to the south is what we've dubbed it. That's where I heard myself a woman's voice that was my voice saying time travel. Okay, from across
Oh
the way.
yeah.
So that was weird. I mean, there's just God, it was so
Well,
weird.
actually,
It was so weird.
Skinwalker Ranch is situated in a very spiritual area, a very sacred area to the Native Americans that were around there. And I think that's got a lot to do with it. I think that might be the key to the whole thing, really, in some aspects. We do know that these areas exist throughout the world, different places along the ley lines or whatever you might want to call them, the energy sectors or centers of the earth itself. We have to wonder about areas like that. I have had some freaky stories from the New Mexico desert. Deserts seem to be a big magnet for a lot of this kind of stuff. And the plains are another place, very much like Skinwalker Ranch, where it's situated. Yeah. So you got to wonder if that might not be the spiritual key to a lot of these things that's going on like that. Because the ancient peoples, I think, without a doubt, Jessica, were in line or at least knew about portals of some sort. They knew, I think, about that activity, although they may not have the right name for it. They might have had different descriptions, but I think they knew what was going on, without doubt.
Oh yeah, and I know somebody that probably has some inside information. Rain C. I think I need to get you on my show sometime because she is Brandon Fugel's babysitter for his kids. Okay, so I bet you got some good stories. Okay, that is really cool. But okay, let's get in touch. Okay. Very, very cool, man. Very, very interesting information. Yeah, absolutely. I think the cryptids know about the portals. I am convinced that they utilize Earth's natural portals to go in and out wherever they're going. I
Mm,
think that humans, I think there's a lot of secret knowledge here, okay, that's been hidden from us. Where humans can access these portals as well. Oh,
hmm
she said
Yeah,
not
I
babysitter.
think I think the ancient peoples attributed a lot of their magic to that. I think they call it magic or whatever that name was and whatever their situation. I've studied a lot of anthropology in my time, and a lot of every culture out there has some kind of a thing about magic. And that's what we call the magic, and they had to describe it that way as being magic to them. That was the only thing they could understand. I have experienced portal activity, and it says you have too. And
Yeah,
it's freaky stuff, very weird stuff. Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. It's all them ley lines out there. It's all the ley lines. So wow, I have to wonder, like, oh, I was kind of wondering, like, was that crash in the middle of the ley lines? Okay, because here we go. Let's get into this conversation for a second because I don't have a ley line map to pull up tonight, but when I did the show I had remote viewed the Bermuda Triangle for Barry Littleton. Okay, that was one of my targets, and we found out that there was like I guess out there in Bermuda, like off the, wherever Bermuda is out there on the coast, east coast of the United States, out in the ocean and the Atlantic. Okay, it's like all these ley lines, like kind of me.
Uh-huh.
It's like a huge intersection of ley lines that like come out off the coast of Florida, right there, off that coast, and that can't be very far from where this crash happened. Okay, so I mean, I know that they say that the guy hit the yoke. That's what we call it, right? He hit the yoke with his knee and he took it off autopilot. But um, there's a lot of missing planes in that area and stuff. That's the Bermuda Triangle right there. Okay, the
Oh
Bermuda
yeah.
Triangle. So an area of high strangeness, people going missing, and the magnetic compasses and stuff start spinning around, and
That's the
people
first
getting
thing I
caught.
watch for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, deviation and compasses. You can feel it though. A lot of times, you feel a hair standing up on the back of the neck, kind of on your arms, kind of thing. It's like a static electricity in the air, a humming sound, like or vibration, and a lot of mists and fog are sometimes associated with these things. So there are a lot of telltale signs to this. To me, it's fascinating stuff, and I believe it happens. And here's another interesting thing and you got to ask yourself this question: why are so many sacred sites sitting right on ley lines? That's very strange. I mean, all over the world, not just in this country. I mean, everywhere you look, these sacred sites are lined up with these ley lines. It's strange.
Because they're harnessing some kind of energy, probably. I don't know. I have a friend who plots out ley lines, and she not only plots out ley lines and travels around the United States, but she's visiting. She's been visiting. I met her at the Etowah Indian Mound, so she's visiting all the different Indian burial mounds and making connections. Let's just say, and I need to get in touch with her. I haven't talked to my friend in a while. Okay, but making connections into maybe the Indian burial mounds were used for something different too. Okay, and it may have something to do with like water flow and energy fields and all that. It's just, I don't know. Maybe we'll do a show on that one day in the future. Okay, I don't know enough about it to talk about it right now, but she's doing some pretty cool research.
I've studied a lot of the mounds. The burial mounds are fascinating things. If people want to do some research on them, it is a very deep rabbit hole. But they're called fairy forts in Ireland, by the way. There's some interesting stuff going on with those burial mounds and why they're there and how they're lined up with the summer solstice and all this other stuff. It's wild. It's freaky stuff. I believe the ancient peoples, Jessica, without a doubt, knew a lot more about this earth than we do right now in many aspects. I believe they were more closer and more in touch and grounded with the earth than we are. And I believe that they knew a lot more of its secrets than we do.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Yes, Rain. The free energy. Yes, there's something that has to do with free energy. Actually, that's exactly what it is. With what I was kind of where I was going. Okay, with that, with the ley lines and the Indian burial mounds and the rivers and stuff. It has to do with free energy and let's just say currency. Okay, currency. And water flow. Okay, things like that. So we're. One day we'll talk about that more if I can get my friend to come on the show. But
I have run into elemental spirits, and they are attached to the land, fire, earth, water, wind. They are stronger spiritually than other type of spirits. They are like mega spirits on drugs or something. They are very powerful spirits. And why are they so powerful? Because they're hooked into the natural energy of this planet that we live on. This is a living thing that we are living on here. Earth, our Mother Earth, is a living thing. It has its own energy. That's where lightning comes from. You know, a lot of people don't understand that lightning does not come from the sky. It comes from the sky, but first it comes from where? The earth, and goes to the sky and back down again. The earth has a lot of fantastic energy in it. Whether a lot of it we can see and gauge it with our instruments, and there may be other types of energy that we don't know about that the ancient people did.
Oh, 100%, absolutely. And speaking of good energy and lots of wild energy, we've got Drewski in here with Cryptid Warfare. And Drewski is actually my guest Saturday night on The Hunt here on my channel. We're going to be talking about cryptid warfare operations and investigations. So thank you for being here, Drewski. Thank you for swinging by. He's on his way to work. We're going to be seeing him on Saturday night. So you guys, please join us. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to talk about skinwalkers, crawlers, dogmen, his investigations into the caves of Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama. It's going to be good. Okay, really good. So y'all please come back on Saturday and see that. But thank you for being here. But yeah, we've lost that connection, Dennis, with Earth. A lot of people have, not everybody. Okay, but humanity as a whole. You know, everybody's on their technology now, and it's things that connect.
I think a lot of the cryptids too. I think a lot of the cryptids, Jessica, are tied to this energy too, or they know about this energy. Somehow or another, they manipulate it sometimes, maybe or use it for their own purposes. I think a lot of these cryptids may have a definite tie to some of that stuff, without doubt.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's just so interesting. I think that a lot of the Indian burial mounds are connected. Okay, they're all connected, including the Cahokia Mounds. I have not been to the Cahokia Mounds. Okay, I've not. We have several mounds here in Georgia, and I've been to all of them that I know of so far. The ones in North Georgia, at least. We have them all over. We have them in Middle Georgia and South Georgia. I haven't been to any of those, but we have them here. So
that reminds me of a horror movie I might recommend you might want to watch. And it was this horror movie actually it came out I think about 4 or 5 years ago. It's called the New Daughter, the New Daughter, and it stars Kevin Costner. Believe it or not, Kevin Costner in a horror movie. Okay, and it all ties into the fact that on his property, he lives in South Carolina. On his property, there's a mound. And that's all I tell you about it. You need to check this movie out. It is wild, but it make you look at mounds in a whole different light. Something lives in those mounds. Okay, that's all I'll tell you.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I got out at the mounds in Etowah, I got out of my vehicle and I had this overwhelming feeling of just giants. Giants. I was like, I heard it in my head. I heard giants. I am convinced. And somebody in the chat had written also Dogman. Okay. Dogman is something I'm going to be talking about on Saturday night with Drewski, in addition to some other stuff. But Dogman, I mean, cryptids, all these things are so interconnected. They're so interconnected. And
I think a lot of that, and we won't get into that today, but I think a lot of it goes back to the Nephilim equation, I call it. I think a lot of that's got a lot to do with it. And I want to say this about the Nephilim. We think about giants as being sort of like they got jolly green giant, walking around, nice looking guys. They just happen to like to eat people once in a while. But these were monsters. This was a race of monsters. They didn't look that human. Okay. They had double rows of teeth, double extra digits. These were monsters any way you look at it, not only just because of the way they looked, but according to their size as well. And I talked about this on my show last night. There definitely was not a natural birth thing going on here, folks, with these kind of things. This was a unnatural thing in completely every way you can look at it. And that would be what the Nephilim were all about. But that, I think, is buried in our history. And when we go back into certain areas of our history and we look at the folklore and the old tales and the stories, it's buried in there. It's there. And on the flip side of the giants, the most interesting thing of all are the little people. I saw a film just the other day where they found an actual little miniature city, a little village, I think in South America. And this looks like it would have been made by very diminutive people. It's very strange. So on the flip side, you've got the giants, and then you got the little people, and both of these run concurrently through every folklore in the world almost.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. It looks like a dollhouse almost to me. When I saw that, I was thinking dollhouse. I mean, the kids, but also there were little people. There still are little people out and about, but those would have been like Smurf-sized people. That's tiny. It's pretty fascinating though. I can't remember the name of. There's an island somewhere that has another place very similar to that, where they said they had little people, like little tiny gnome-sized people. It's down in South America somewhere. So I'll do some digging on that and see if I can find some information.
There's even a guy, and this is amazing to watch. He makes these little acorn people. He makes them out of acorns, and they look like little fairies. And he actually puts berries and seeds on them and takes photographs of birds eating from these things. It is amazing. You can almost say, yeah, that's what fairies would look like. You know, it's imagination at work, but it is fascinating stuff. But that is part of our history. I mean, it's ingrained in our culture for a reason. You know, it's not one thing to say something is the way it is. You got to find out what its origin is, where its beginning is. Once you find out its beginning, then it helps you understand it more. You understand where it's coming from and what it comprises. And like with that question just now about government lands and forests and stuff like that. Absolutely, there's more sightings on it because that is, you got to remember, government land, national parks are controlled lands. Let me say that word again, controlled lands. And that is where things happen, folks. If you're going to have an experiment or you want to play around with nature, where do you go? You do it in a controlled environment. And that's the thing about national parks and stuff, okay?
I mean, I'm not going to say that I do a whole lot of research in national parks, but I might do a lot of research in national parks. Okay. And,
Uh-huh.
and that's where you're going to have a whole lot of activity sometimes. Okay. And, yeah, it could be controlled, Dennis. I do believe you're right on that. There's,
Oh, yeah.
there's something going on in the national
Oh,
park.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I wouldn't. I would think if you want to see something freaky, sometimes that'd be the place to hang out. Definitely if you're going to
Oh, trust
research
me,
it.
I know. It is a freaky place to hang out. It is.
Yeah.
It's a fun place. But you just got to be very careful. Okay, be very careful when you're out there. Don't be scared to go to our national and state parks, y'all. Don't be scared. But just tell somebody where you're going, please. Let people know when you're going to one, and keep your head on a swivel. Okay, that's all. That's all
Absolutely.
we're asking. Yeah,
Don't take anything for granted.
that's right.
You never know. You never know what you may run up on. In this world nowadays, all the bets are off.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, Dennis, this has been a fantastic show tonight. Oh my gosh. Let's kind of get a final thought, a final word on our Flight 401, the ghost of Flight 401. Do you have any parting
I
words
think it's.
tonight on that?
I think it is one of the most interesting paranormal stories out there. I've thought about that for many years now, and what is I think, so interesting about it is the fact that it's not just the trauma and not just the eyewitnesses, but the ties that they had to what happened. Maybe they felt they were responsible. Hopefully now, at long last, all these years later, they have found peace and they're at rest. I hope. We do know without a doubt that the reused parts of Flight 401 are at rest.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope that through through the remote viewing data that I got, I do believe that there could be some lingering around, or there was at one point. There was some lingering around of the souls. My hope and my wish is that people who go to sites like that where they're having crashes and they choose to go there to do ghost hunting and to try to
Uh-huh.
communicate with the dead, I hope that people will work to help those souls cross over. Okay, that's all I can ask for. I've done I did a remote viewing target a while back. I think it was a haunted. I don't really want to say this because I know this is a business. Okay, but there's a haunted house in Texas. Okay, and I have to. This is my final word here tonight, y'all. Dennis, there's a haunted house there, and some people that I know had gone to do a ghost hunt there. And I was picking up on this place that there were a lot of trapped children there. Okay, and souls of children who had passed on and families, and there was a very dark entity keeping them there, but it was thriving off the fear of all those people ghost hunting there. And the people, when I was told that when you go there to do a ghost hunt, you have to sign a waiver that you will not cross those souls over and you won't help them. Okay,
Uh-huh.
and I think that's horrible. And I
It
just
is.
hope that, and that's why I don't do a lot of shows on ghosts. Okay, because of that actually really scarred me after I did that, and I looked into that. It was really sad, and uh, and so I can only hope that when we encounter souls on this plane,
Uh-huh.
if we can help to send them into the light, Dennis, and to do
Oh, the
what's
sad thing
right.
Jessica, and I've experienced this too. A lot of things, dealing in demonology and all that, that there are certain evil spirits that can hold souls back from where they need to go. They can hold these souls, especially the souls that they possessed. They have even that power over them after death. So death may not free you from a lot of these things. The prison may still continue. And that's a sad thing to think about, really.
Yeah, that is really sad. It's really sad. So Yeah, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, everybody. I'm sending so much love and light to all of everyone who's watching tonight, everybody who's listening on the podcast, and I want everybody to have a wonderful night tonight, and let's try to leave on a higher note than that, because I feel bad. I just kind of brought it down a little bit, because it does hurt thinking about that. I've lost a lot of people that I love in my life, and I just want to think that everyone that I know and I love and everybody in this world passes through and goes somewhere better. You know what I mean? We go somewhere better. Um,
Over the years, I've
house.
had people. Over the years, I've had people say, "What have you taken away from your paranormal research?" The one
Yeah.
thing that I always say that always gives me comfort is to know the fact that death is not the end. There is something beyond this life. And that should be a comfort to everybody to know that this is not the end, but just the beginning.
Yes, it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning, and this is a beautiful life, and we have a wonderful, wonderful holiday coming up this weekend. And I want to say thank you to all of our people who have served in the military and in law enforcement, including yourself, Dennis. Thank you for your service, and all our first responders as well. Thank you guys so much for all you've done and all you do, and to everyone who is not with us today who has served in our military. It is Memorial Day weekend, so I want everybody to please have a wonderful weekend, and please stay safe out there with whatever you do, and come back and see me on Saturday night on the Hunt with Drewski of Cryptid Warfare Podcast. Now, Dennis, tell everybody where they can find you, your channel, your books, your website, all that stuff. Please.
You can find me on Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock p.m. and Friday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. on my channel, Hunting the Shadows YouTube channel. My books are available on Amazon. Just type in Dennis W. Carroll. And they're also available on Barnes & Noble. My website is denniswcarroll.com. And we're starting a new show. My friend Gerald Fountain and I will have a new show on Monday nights at 9 o'clock, and it's called The Road Less Traveled. So we're going to get into some interesting topics on that. So be looking for that as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. I can't wait. I love Carroll. Carroll's in the chat tonight. He and Jane both. Thank y'all for being here. And I can't wait. You have so much to talk about, Dennis, and so much knowledge in all of this. So I just love it when you come on the show with me and hang out. And I think this was a fantastic show tonight. So thank you so much, Dennis.
My pleasure.
For everything you do.
Always.
Yeah, awesome. All right, y'all. Well, please come see me this weekend. Tomorrow, Saturday night on the Hunt with Drewski of Cryptid Warfare. We have done some field investigating together, and I was with him at that Skinwalker cave. Okay, and he actually has what we're calling a crawler that peeked out at the guys. They went farther down the cave than I did, and they did pick up what we think was a pale crawler on video. Okay, peeking out after he whistled at it, Dennis. He whistled, and the thing poked his head out from behind the cave. So they say don't whistle at night, right? Don't whistle in caves unless you're looking for trouble, like he was. So that's going to be a fun show on Saturday. So everybody come back. Y'all have a great weekend. Dennis, thanks again for being here. I'm not going to be at Spaced Out Radio on Sunday, you guys. It's my birthday, so I'm going to be taking off and doing something.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. It's going to be a fun weekend. All right, y'all. Have a wonderful night. Dennis, thank you for being here, and we'll see y'all Saturday. Bye, y'all.